Well, I'm going to a haunted house that's in an abandoned amusement park this evening, so let's talk about Carnival of Souls. And I'm going to say preemptively, this is definitely an interpretation of Carnival of Souls, where death of the author definitely applies, because I know I'm going to be bringing some things into this that would not have been thought of while filming, and the people who made it have said exactly as much. So, we're talking about a 1962 film that takes place in Salt Lake City, where we have a church organist that survived a car crash into a river, supposedly. And essentially, when she's driving between Lawrence, Kansas, where she grew up, and Salt Lake City, she goes past Saltair, which, as you guys may remember if you follow this channel, I went to the location of Saltair, actually. So, most of it is, as you probably remember, gone. It burned down in 1970, I believe, for when the actual buildings that you see in the film were destroyed. The roller coaster blew down a few years before the movie was made, but yeah, the giant racer roller coaster that was there blew down in the 1950s, but it is a great look at Saltair when it was standing, but there's actually something fascinating about why Mary would be fascinated with Saltair. So, rather than just making a cheap Joyland reference here, because Joyland was not that old when Mary would have been living in Kansas. She grew up in Lawrence, so there was an abandoned amusement park in the town where she grew up called Woodland Park, and it closed in the 1920s, but it would have been sitting abandoned into her life because it was sitting abandoned there until 1951. So if we assume that the present, when the movie is taking place, is 1962, then if we assume she's around 25, 30 in the movie, then she would have definitely had memories of seeing Woodland Park, and then it got washed away by the flood, and she might be fascinated by that. So that's a little piece of her history that you may find interesting. So, side note, you may remember in my travels, I went to Oaks Park in Portland, Oregon, and something that they have there is they have their roller rink with a Wurlitzer theater organ right above the people. Given the era that Woodland Park is from, I can very much see them having something similar to that rink like what they have at Oaks Park. So, when Mary was growing up, seeing Woodland Park, but never being able to actually go see her curiosities because there were enough adults in her life that told her she had to be ladylike and she could not go into an abandoned amusement park to explore it. With the amount of that would have been happening in that era, it's likely that she would have heard stories from people, though, about there being some sort of dance pavilion within Woodland Park that would have had a Wurlitzer above the people dancing. So it's possible her getting into organ playing, because she's clearly not religious, and that's where a lot of that industry is. Because she got into it without being religious, it's possible it's because she wanted to revive something like Woodland Park. So, we have discussed some of the era before the movie takes place. So now let's discuss some of what actually happens in the movie. So I do think it is a lot more literal than people think, because the idea of, because spoilers, I don't know why I'm saying spoilers. I'm talking about a movie from 1962 that's older than my parents, but her body's in the car at the end of the movie, dead. in Lawrence, Kansas, after the whole thing where she up and moves to Salt Lake City to be a church organist and says it's just a job. But I do think that before the accident, there is more to Mary than just being a strong-willed, career-minded woman that isn't really interested in interaction with people. But I do think that when she emerges from that water, that's what pushes her to continue on in some form, even if it's not her physical body, like an out-of-body experience where it's sort of like, I don't know if you know from the Roger Rabbit comic books, but essentially to make a copy of yourself, and like that copy can only last for so long. Like maybe something like that is happening and it's an out-of-body experience, but it is still a physical form in some way. Like maybe something like that is going on, but it's that would have made the copy. So there is more to her than what we see in the movie, but I do think that is part of her character. I do think that, I'm not going to take church vows. Like I said, it could have very easily been talks of a Wurlitzer at an abandoned amusement park that got her into organ playing. So the idea of her not being religious, it's like that definitely aligns with that. But like, I mean, we're shown that she isn't interested in drinking. She isn't interested in sex. So why would she not be willing to take church vows even for show, even if she sees it as just a job and she's not religious? Well, it's possible she's queer. And like when we see her in that car with the three women, I think it's possible that one or both of them are partners. So like, I mean, that's definitely a reason that she would not want to take church vows, because if she took church vows, maybe she believes there's some power to those vows, and her having those girls as her partners, maybe that's why she refuses to take the vows. And because she's just strong-willed and career-minded, she doesn't remember that is why she doesn't want to take the vows. She just remembers that she doesn't want to take the vows, and she's strong-willed and career-minded when she's having that conversation with the people at the organ shop before she leaves Lawrence. And something else that the movie has that does give credibility to this somewhat being literal, but also the idea of it being an out-of-body experience, is how she fades into and out of reality, where it's like for a moment she doesn't exist and then the birds bring her back in. That's definitely something that it has that feature. Like, I mean, I like how it shows the horrors of basically the world not acknowledging you even exist, of indifference, because that's something that's a real terror, is the idea of total indifference. Like you're having a bunch of problems that you're worried about, and everyone else in the world is totally indifferent to it. Like, I mean, I think that's a great visual to represent something like that, is that you have the fading into and out of reality. And I think because of the fading into and out of reality, that definitely shows that there is something literal about this. So this is not an, she was dead the whole time sort of thing. Now let's talk about the ending. So we see after she gets fired from the church for doing stuff like playing tritones, which is forbidden in the church. Like, I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a tritone. I know enough music terminology. Like, I don't know enough about the names of things, but like I do compose. So like it's a weird thing. I think that's those are tritones that she's playing that get her fired from her job at the church because the church has a dogma against doing tritones. Like, that's definitely that. Like, if you look at composers from, say, back in the day of Bach, I know that that was one of the rules that they had to follow of, oh, you're not allowed to do tritones because the church finds it unacceptable. Like, that was something that composers in that era had to deal with. So the fact that she's doing that in a church, that's what gets her fired. And then, like, after she gets fired, she goes and ends up at Saltair for the ending of the film, where you see the Carnival of Souls, the titular thing, come after her, and her body just disappears with physical footprints left behind, a car that she drove, and an investigation that shows that she was actually there, that you see happening. And, like, that investigation showing that that was actually happening is what I think proves that the events in Salt Lake City are very literal. And also, you see the car pulled out of the water in Lawrence, and you see her body in that car. So the idea that maybe she did survive the car accident, and maybe the souls, maybe they are somewhat paranormal, and they send her back to that instant and make it so that she doesn't survive. Maybe it is survivor's guilt. Maybe it actually is survivor's guilt. Maybe there is some literalness to that rather than just the idea of being dead the whole time. Like, maybe there actually is survivor's guilt, and the souls are that guilty conscience, and that literally sends her back in time so that she is pulled out of that car so that she doesn't have survivor's guilt. Maybe there's something there with that. But, like, I mean, there's definitely more to this film than just, oh, she was dead the whole time. And, like, I mean, because it's an amusement park, an abandoned amusement park setting, you know, I couldn't help but do some analysis of it, especially since I'm going to a haunted house at an abandoned amusement park tonight.